Alright guys, it's midweek and we are halfway through the first season of Wheel of Time, so I thought I'll make a mid-season review for the series. Starting with the opening shot of the series, instead of using the opening lines of the book which are extremely iconic, which repeat in each book of Wheel of Time, they decided to go ahead and have another set of opening lines for the show. The opening line of the book goes, "The wheel of time turns, ages come and pass." It's one of the most iconic lines, and I won't recite the lines all over again, but I'll just read out the lines that they used for the show. And these lines go, "The world is broken. Many years ago, men with power believed they could cage darkness itself. When they failed, seas boiled. Mountains were swallowed. The women of Aes Sedai were left to pick up the pieces." Now I find this bit very interesting because what they're doing with these set of lines is they are setting the tone for the duality of the world, of everything, which is a very strong theme for the whole series, I believe. In this very voiceover, they have established the duality between man and woman, and they've established that they both have very different ways of dealing and understanding power. And it was very interesting to see that instead of using the opening lines of the book for the first episode as the opening lines itself, they used those lines to end the episode. So I thought that was a very nice touch they gave. Now this brings me to one very exciting thing which I discovered a bit too late. I just discovered it today. The X-ray feature of this show on Amazon Prime, it has a lot of interesting stuff. So each episode also comes with a special animated featurette, which is a small piece of animation around 3 minutes of runtime. And those kind of cover the things which have not been covered in the show directly but indirectly. So I just watched them today, all 4 of them, and it was quite a delight. So if you have not watched those, please do go and check them out, because this idea of duality and this idea of how women and men were able to handle the great power differently is also mentioned in one of those featurettes. I think it is the one which was there for episode 4. Now, why I say the idea of duality is one of the main themes of the series, because not just the male and female duality is talked about quite a few times in the book, also the duality of good and evil is by all means a very important theme for the book as well. And very interestingly, I noticed when I was watching the show for the second time, there's this one quote from the book which says, "War is for fool killing fools for foolish reasons." Now obviously this talks about how someone is shunning the idea of violence and how one thinks that violence is stupid and one should adopt non-violent paths. So that's something which gets established in the first very episode. But as soon as the second episode opens, we are thrown with this line while the stuff that's happening is happening on screen. And one of the white cloaks, the questioners, what he says is that brutality is the only path to mercy. Now the first episode was talking something else. The second episode starts with this tone. So obviously there is a duality that they're showing there as well. Talking about quotes, there were quite a few quotes which I noticed, and I would just like to share them with you. Now, apart from the 2 that I just mentioned, there's another quote which says, "What greater revenge against violence than peace? And what greater revenge against death than life?" Now this is something which I at least took like a while to understand, because I do get things slow at times. Apart from this, when the Tinkers are talking, and there's this whole thing about the way of leaf and everything. So it's mentioned that some leaves are blown away from the tree, and the whole idea about how you may not want to have the life or you may not want to live in the world that you're born in was something which was very interesting. I also think this is one of the very main ideas of Buddhism as well, and as I've talked in another video, the lot of philosophies mentioned in these set of books do come from Buddhism as well. So I just noticed this was another one such bit. Another quote which I have already shared in the previous video, which goes, "In order to stop violence, everyone everywhere has to stop." Now all of these are very basic non-violent philosophies, and they did also remind me of some of the philosophies and ideas that Mahatma Gandhi had also shared with us in his autobiography, which is called My Experiments with Truth. Now there are quite a few quotes in the book. Obviously it's a fat book, which were not accommodated in the series, but there's this one quote which I thought I would share since we are talking about the ideas of non-violence and tolerance and all of that. In the book, it happens in chapter number 25 when Perrin is talking to Tinkers and is having a conversation with Ryan, and this goes, "You cut down a tree with your axe. The axe does violence to the tree and escapes unharmed. Is that how you see it? Wood is soft compared to steel, but the sharp steel is dulled as it chops, and the sap of the tree will rust and pit it. The mighty axe does violence to the helpless tree and is harmed by it. So it is with men, though the harm is in the spirit. So it's very nicely saying that you may adopt violent ways, but it will kill your spirit, it will harm your soul. So you may not realize it, but you as well are getting damaged and you are getting hurt by the hurt that you're giving on to others. Moving on, another thing which I really enjoyed while watching the show was the art design and the architecture they have featured, the locations they have adopted. It was an absolute delight to watch the replicas of all the art that we have seen all over these years, which were on the cover of the books and all of that, and actually see them on screen as actual buildings right there. The houses, the inns, the architecture of the two rivers was something which I really enjoyed watching. Also, the architecture of Shadar Logoth was something which I really enjoyed. I was so excited to see how they have kind of mixed up different styles of architecture to come up for the style of this particular place, because this place, as mentioned in the books, was one of the main places of power back in the day, and so it does make a statement of how the architecture of that place also was. And very interestingly, I was able to spot quite a few motifs from Indian architecture, and being a student of architecture, it was very thrilling for me to spot those. Some of the places are explained really well in the books, and obviously the Wheel of Time series is known for how much it dwells upon the idea of explaining things and how immersive the text is. So obviously all of that can't really be accommodated on screen, and Shadar Logoth was also one of those places which I really enjoyed reading, but still it was again very exciting to see it on screen as well. The locations used for this series is also amazing, and it actually did take me way back in time when I used to spend a lot of time in the mountains, which brings me to this idea that how I actually discovered these set of books in the first place. I used to visit McLeodganj a lot back in the day, Dharamshala and McLeodganj, which is the seat of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and a lot of people from all over the world used to visit that place. And since the roots of most of the philosophies used in this book either lie in Hinduism or Buddhism, all those tourists who used to come to visit His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they used to be huge fan of these books as well. So I was kind of introduced to these books by such people, and I remember there was this architect by the name of Didi Contractor, and I went to her house, and she had her library nicely stacked and everything, and she had a set of these books, and she said, "We don't get such books anymore. All the books that we get these days, they are just all dried up and there's no juice in them anymore." So that was how I was introduced to these books, and it's just now that I'm actually sitting down and reading them. So those places in the mountains where I used to stay a lot back then, they somehow look so similar to the places and locations that have been used in this show, particularly for the place of Two Rivers. So it was such a delight watching all those locations. I did a quick Google search to figure out what has been the choice of locations for season 1, and it turns out that a lot of it has been shot in Czech Republic, in and around Prague, and the bits with the mountains and all comes from the Bovic area from Slovenia. So it was quite a delight to see all of that. Now coming down to the characters and the structuring of the episodes that we have had till now, the first 30 minutes of the first episodes are a very nice setup. They focus on bringing out the internal conflicts of all the main characters who are there in the Two Rivers. So we see a lot of stuff about their own personal lives and what they are going through and what they are fighting with within. The action starts to happen only after 33 minutes 45 seconds to be precise. And the visualization of all the magic starts to happen at 38 minutes and 50 seconds, which kind of was, I think, something that was a little overdone. All the visualization of the magic with all the streaks and stuff, I think it's happening a bit too much on screen, and maybe we can tone that down. It will help to probably make the world more believable, I would say. Also, when the action starts, things happen at such a rapid pace that it was a bit too much for me to handle and understand and take. So it took me a while to understand, okay, who is dying and who's alive. So that was a bit for me. Also, the on-screen violence was a bit too much for me to take, and I was not expecting that in the first very episode of the series. So that is something which didn't really work too well for me. The complexity and the confusions of all the personal relations between the main characters become very evident in the third episode of the series. When Rand says that he wants to go to the White Tower because Nynaeve would do that, and when Nynaeve tells Perrin that Rand would be going back to the Two Rivers, and then he tells her that no, he knows him too well and he would be heading towards the White Tower because that's where she would go, making it very clear that he understands that they both have feelings for each other, but at the same time, this whole new chemistry starts to happen between them as well. We also see hints of anger in Matt's character when his money is stolen, although it's a very understandable situation, but I do have a feeling it's kind of foreshadowing something, that he does get angry very quickly and that's maybe going to lead him somewhere. Talking about the personal relationships, I do feel that it's more like some gossip that we are discussing, but as one book told me when I was reading it, that humans actually developed verbal language only because they could gossip. As for basic survival, we don't really need any kind of verbal language. The whole world and all the other animals can thrive without it. Also, very interestingly, the main characters are slowly understanding and identifying their strengths. Nynaeve knows that she can make fire, like literally, and Rand has this amazing physical strength which he can use to bring down iron doors, which even 3 people of his size can't manage. And Egwene have supernatural healing powers, and Matt probably can identify certain things around him because in the 4th episode something does happen which we don't really know exactly what was that, so maybe that's going to be revealed later, but I have a feeling that there's going to be some connection with all of that stuff coming out of him and going in back again. It's doing something to him with which he can identify or probably overcome something as well. Also in the 4th episode, the conversation between Logain and Maureen was very satisfying to watch. Somehow it's a very short conversation, but I think it was so wonderful to see that on screen. The Tinkers are definitely a very interesting set of people, and while watching them, I did kind of feel that they're not only basically based or inspired from the ideas of how gypsies were or are or used to be, but also from Romas which exist in Europe, which are said to have traveled to Europe all the way from certain parts of Asia. And something very interesting, in the 2nd episode itself, they show it around the very beginning of the episode that the Trollocs are crossing this one shallow stream and they're running across water. When I was watching that, I thought that, okay, are they doing this in the show? Do Trollocs manage water and are they not scared of that? But later we do understand that that's not the case, and they can't really cross water if the water is not just shallow water. This brings me to a very interesting idea that in this set of books, what we see is that evil cannot cross water or overpower water, but when I used to stay in the mountains, I got to know like 2 ideas about water and how they react to spirits and other evil creatures. So one idea is that whenever there's a flood, and if water from other places washes over a land or your land or something, you never know what it's bringing with itself. And you never know what kind of evil spirits have entered that place using that flood water as vehicles. So that's how I was told that ghost and evil spirits travel. So that's an interesting bit which I was just reminded of when I was watching all of this. And also, again, the locals, they tell you stories like you shouldn't go do this or you shouldn't do that. And it's also believed in certain mountainous regions in India that the rivers and the streams, all the evil spirits and ghosts and all those supernatural beings, they kind of drive the power from running water. So that's why you should be very careful whenever you are around any such water body or any such place. Now, a lot of people are comparing this show with Game of Thrones, which I think is very unfair, but I also do understand why this comparison is happening. Just a few things which I think I noticed while I was watching this show. The opening credits seem to have been influenced strongly by the opening credits of Game of Thrones, and somehow I think this has not come out as well as the opening credits of Game of Thrones. Also, Game of Thrones kind of used magic very minimally, and it was only towards the end of the first season and the first book actually that something magical happens. So I think that worked very well for the series, because it started to look like more of a historical political drama as opposed to high fantasy, which kind of invited a lot of people who may not have the appetite for high fantasy to start watching this show and then keep continuing to watch it later. And I also got to know that the episode 4 largely does not depend upon the books, and a lot of stuff that's happening is not there in any of the books. So it's a departure from the raw material. Now, when Game of Thrones started to depart from the raw material, we all know that how terribly things got shaken up. But surprisingly, when this series has kind of departed from the books, this episode is being received so well. Everyone is enjoying it, and even I did. I loved watching this episode. So that was something which was very strange, because I thought that something that didn't work so well in the other show is working so well in this show. Not that I'm not enjoying the books, they have a very different appeal and they're so immersive, and I'm loving reading them. But this episode also was quite a pleasure to watch. Alright guys, that's it for now, and I think I'll make another video for the next episode, episode 5, when it drops on Friday, and I'll talk about that and see how it turns out. So what has your reaction been to this show? Are you enjoying it? Are there certain things which are not up to the mark for you? And how is this whole thing appearing to you? I would love to hear that. And until next time guys, keep reading, keep watching, stay healthy, stay safe. Cheers.